I heard that the Bachurim in the Beis Medrash wanted some shir and some inyan of hashkafa, some inyan of musar, and the question then became what sefer we should do. And there were many, Baruch Hashem, there are many, many choices. I knew right off the bat, based on the people who were asking me, that the Hasidic Sfarim were probably not that acceptable, like Tanya and the like, although I certainly would not mind doing Tanya. So it narrowed down really to two choices, and they're very, very hard to decide between them. One was the Ramchal Sefer Das Tevunos. Now, Das Tevunos is a sefer that people are probably less familiar with than Derech Hashem. Derech Hashem is, basic Jewish philosophy, but Das Tevunos is a whole sefer on hashgacha pratis, like how much of your life does God determine, how much of your life is mikra, mazel, and it develops the idea based on Kabbalah. It's absolutely based on Kabbalah, but with not non-Kabbalistic terminology about the inyan of hashgacha pratis. That's certainly a gewaldige topic, and Das Tevunos is the gewaldige sefer. But the problem is, it's on one topic going for 500 pages. So in other words, it takes one inyan and it goes through it, eon. And sometimes when you're learning once a week, so you're not holding in the sugya so much, it's very hard to have a sefer that's delving with unending depth into one topic. So the alternative is something that's almost the opposite type of sefer. And this is a sefer called Even Shleima. Note, in case you don't pronounce it correctly, you're given the kudos, Even Shleima. A lot of people say Even Shlomo, and that's incorrect. Even Shleima is, as it were, a pun. When the Torah says at the end of Parshas Kiseitze that your weights and measures have to be accurate in business, so it uses the phrase, Even Shleima Yi'alach. You should have a complete stone. If your weight is a stone, it shouldn't be missing anything. So the Mechaber of Even Shleima, which is about the teachings of Vilna Gaon, calls this a perfect Even, but Even is also a Rashi Teva. Eliyahu ben Shleima is Shlomo, right? So it's Einachinami. Of course, a Litvak pronounces Shlomo as Shleima anyway, so that's the way Litvak says. Litvak doesn't have the cholam is an A sound. It's like Teira. Teira is how a Litvak says it, and the like. Now, what is the Sefer Even Shleima? So we know Even Shleima is a likut. It's an anthology based on the teachings of the Vilna Gaon. So the Vilna Gaon did not write Even Shleima, but it's an anthology based on his teachings in Musar, Hashkafa, Midas. So it is not a Sefer of Halacha, it's a Sefer about Hashkafa, Midas, and Musar. It was compiled by a very chashuv Talmid Chacham in the middle of the 19th century, the middle of the 1800s, whose name was Rav Shmuel Maltzin. And Rav Shmuel Maltzin had a son who was even more famous, Rav Yitzchak Maltzin. And Rav Yitzchak Maltzin took the first edition of Even Shleima, which you literally cannot find. I was just a matter of curiosity. I would like to see what the first edition was. But he added Makoros, he added a lot of stuff. He kind of doubled the size. And since then, the only version of Even Shleima that is printed is the version as augmented by Rav Yitzchak Maltzin. So originally Rav Shmuel Maltzin, Rav Yitzchak Maltzin. Rav Yitzchak Maltzin is famous for other Sfarim that he wrote. Those of you that might be learning Hilchas Shabbos Be'in may be familiar with the Sefer Shavisas Shabbos, which is on the first 11 Malachos, Bishul and the like. That is written by Rav Yitzchak Maltzin. Some of you might have seen something called Seder Hagra, with a beautiful parish called Ishei Yisrael. Ishei Yisrael is by Rav Yitzchak Maltzin, right? So he's written other Svarim as well, but he is also, if not the original author, he is the augmenter of Even Shleima. Now, if this is an anthology of the teachings of the Vilna Gaon, where was it anthologized from? What books of the Vilna Gaon were these teachings taken from? Well, the answer is basically two types of Makairis. One Makor is the Perish HaGra on Sefer Mishlei. The Gra wrote a long, well actually he didn't write, but the Gra has a long commentary on the book of Proverbs, on Sefer Mishlei. In fact, this was the very first Sefer of the Gra that was printed after the Gra was nifter, before his Perish on Shulchan Aruch, before his Chidushim on Shas, before his Sform on Kabbalah. Because Reishis Chachma Yiras Hashem, the beginning of wisdom, is to fear Hashem and to revere Hashem and to serve Hashem. So the Beis Din of Vilna paskins that the Perish HaGra and Mishlei should be the very first Sefer that was printed. Now, the Perish HaGra and Mishlei is a book about Midos Tovos and how to eradicate or how to move away from Midos Ros. So interspersed in the Perish HaGra and Mishlei are many ideas that can be anthologized, right? So in Mishlei itself, it might be part of a very long interpretation of Psukim. You see the difference here. In other words, the Gra might say a foundational idea, but then, this explains this Maimer Chazal, and this Maimer Chazal, and this Maimer Chazal, and this is Miyashav, the Stira here. So in the Even Shleima, a lot of that is avoided, although later footnotes try to put it back in. But the Sefer Even Shleima was to give you the Yesod without necessarily all of the back and forth. Although, as I say, other later Hosafos put the back and forth back in. The other source is, people don't realize, or maybe you do, how much the Vilna Gaon wrote on Kabbalah. The Vilna Gaon wrote commentaries on the Sefer Tzniasa, which is a chelek of the Zohar. The Vilna Gaon wrote commentaries on Sefer Yetzirah. The Vilna Gaon wrote commentaries on Tikkunei Zohar. He didn't write a commentary on the Zohar straight, but on the Tikkunim, on the Sefer Tzniasa, and the Sefer Yetzirah. And obviously these are Kabbalistic, but in the middle of the Kabbalah there will be Inyanim and Avodas Hashem. So the primary sources for the Even Shleima will generally be the Perish and Mishlei, and the commentaries of the Gra to Sefer Yetzirah, Sefer Tzniasa, which is a chelek of the Zohar, and the Tikkunei Zohar. In addition, a lot is from the Aderes Elio. Aderes Elio are the Perushim of the Vilna Gaon on Chumash, on Tanakh, Chumash, Nevi'im, and Kesuvim. The Kol Elio, which is a very popular compendium of comments of the Grand Chumash, tend to be snappy, short vertlach. Like, you could pick it up, even a bar mitzvah boy could pick it up and have a really nice vort to say. But the Aderes Elio is a much deeper, much deeper, more complicated sefer, and the Even Shleima, the Mechaber of Even Shleima, will draw from the Aderes Elio. Now, if you open the book at random, just any page, just show you the way it works, you will generally see that at the end of each paragraph, it'll give you a makor. So it'll say Mishlei, Vav, etc., Tikkunei Zohar, etc. So if you want to go back to the work of the Vilna Gaon and see the whole thing that's developed, you'll normally be able to move from the Even Shleima back to the original makor. Yeah.
Those makoros written by the author or by the recent published?
No. The makoros were written by the author. What the recent ones do is they reproduce the language of the makoros. So, for example, you're looking at your edition is the most recent Even Shleima, and that actually reproduces the lashon of all the makoros. But what the makor is was put in by Rav Shmuel Malzin and Rav Yitzchak Malzin. They wanted to give you a makor for what it was. So let me read you. It's always good if a sefer has this table of contents. It's worthwhile to look at the table of contents just so you know what inyanim the sefer talks about. And you will notice there are 11 prakim. So Perek Aleph talks about Kol Darchei Shviros Hamidais Harais. All the different ways that you break bad midas, and that is the shirish, that is the root of all avodas Hashem. Again, this is a teaching of the Gra in Mishlei in many, many places, that it's a strange thing actually, that the tachlis of the Torah itself is to give us the tools to break the midas rice and develop midas taivas. Now, we don't always understand what the connection is. I mean, I understand if there's a mitzvah like not speaking Lashon Hara, or a mitzvah like V'ahavta l'recha kamocha, so I understand that's a mitzvah about developing a good midah. It's less easy to understand what that means. I mean, the mitzvah of tefillin is that I should break midas rise. The issue of wearing shatnez is that I should break midas rise. We don't always see what the connection is, but the Vilna Gaon says, in ways we don't always understand, Hashem has an ultimate goal. Mitzvahs are a means to a goal. Mitzvahs are not the end. The tachlis of mitzvahs is to be shover midas rise. That's an amazing idea. That's why we do mitzvahs, to break the bad midas and to improve the good midas. So that is the first parak, Darche Shviras Hamidas. The second parak goes into specific midas, which are called midas harashios. Rashios is rosh, midos that are the root of many bad midos, and that's called kas, taiva, geos. Now this is an interesting trilogy that doesn't quite correspond to Pirkei Avos, that the Gra says, again this is taken from the Gra, the Gra says, and when we read it, get into the parak, we'll obviously look at it in more detail, but today I just want to look at a table of contents. The Gra says that the three shirashim of midas rais are anger, taiva is lust, desire, and the third is geos, which is gaiva, pride, arrogance. Now, Pirkei Avos seems to give us a slightly different list. Pirkei Avos talks about kina, taiva, kavod. Rabbi Elazar HaKapper says, kina, taiva, kavod, right? Jealousy, taiva, kavod, maitzian es ha'adam min ha'elam, they take a person out of the world, meaning he's mafsid eilam haba, and even his life in this world is miserable, the Alter of Slobodka used to say. In fact, they say that either it was to the Alter or maybe it was later, but a person who went off the derech went to the Alter, went to his mashgiach or Rosh Yeshiva and said, I know I'm not going to get olam haba, but I can't forgive you, he says to his mashgiach, for taking away my olam hazeh. Actually, that's one of the, you'll either call it a cost or a benefit of being in yeshiva, and that is you can never enjoy a world menutak from Hashem again, meaning to say, we took that away from you. So if a person goes off the derech, he's mafsid olam haba, okay, nebuch, but at least he might think, have a havamina of enjoying olam hazeh. Nope, not going to do it, because once you've been exposed to the derech HaTorah, you can never really enjoy a life which is separated from Hashem in that way. So Rabbi Elazar HaKapper says that the three foundational bad midas are kina, taiva, kavod. Now, how do they match to the Vilna Gaon's formulation? Kas, taiva, geos. Well, taiva is an easy match. That's the same. Taiva, taiva. Geos matches up pretty close to kavod. Right? I'm a big shot, I got to be honored. So the problem basically is that there's a substitution here between kina and kas. Meaning, Rabbi Elazar HaKapper in the Mishnah calls jealousy as a shirish of a midah ra, and here the Vilna Gaon calls it kas. So just in Pashat Pshat, it must be, presumably, that there is a relationship between anger and jealousy. In other words, they themselves are one midah. Because what is anger? Anger comes from a sense that I'm not getting what I deserve, or I'm getting what I don't deserve. Meaning, I get angry when I think I should have gotten the job instead of you. I get angry when I should have gotten engaged instead of you. I get angry when I should have had the kid instead of you. So if you think about it, anger is very much connected to jealousy. Because jealousy is the midah that I should have it, not you. Anger is exactly that feeling. I'm angry because I'm not getting what's come to me. I'm not getting what's coming to me. Okay, we'll have to talk about this much more, but I'm just throwing out the idea that the Gra's list of three is not the same language as Chazal's list of three, although it might wind up to be the same language. The Gra's three are Kas, Taiva, Geus. Okay, so Parak Aleph and Beis talk about bad midas. and how we eradicate them. Perek Gimel moves to good midos, and that is bitachon and histapkus. The Vilna Gaon says, just like midas rice have a sheirish of kas, taiva, and geos, midas taivais have two shirashim. It's interesting. In other words, there are two foundational roots that give rise to all midas taivas. One is bitachon. But bitachon is the sense of trust in Hashem. And now again, let me just point out, even at an introductory stage, it's kedai to point this out. What is the difference between emunah and bitachon? Right? In fact, we have Svarim, right? The Chazon Ish wrote on emunah ubitachon. The Ramban wrote a Sefer, emunah ubitachon. Right? Emunah means I believe that Hashem runs the world, and everything that happens in the world is because that's HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Ratzon. That's my emunah. I believe that. So what's bitachon? Bitachon also means the same thing. So what's the nafkamina? So one can say really, like Chazon Ish says, bitachon is applied emunah. A person could have an abstract belief that everything comes from God. But that belief does not penetrate their emotional consciousness. They still get anxious. They still get angry. They still get upset. They still get worried and scared and frightened. Bitachon is taking the emunah of the mind and internalizing it into your personality. That I know Hashem is in charge. I'm not scared. I'm not going to worry. Now here, there is an interesting machlokas. The Navardik Shita of emunah, of bitachon really, bitachon, was if you just have enough bitachon in Hashem, then exactly what you want is going to happen. You know, I want a new car. I have bitachon in Hashem. If my bitachon is deep, I'm going to get it. The Chazon Ish took great issue with that. The Chazon Ish said, bitachon is not the Pollyanna idea. You know, bitachon, gamzu l'tova, kol ma di'avid rachamana l'tova. That doesn't mean people aren't going to die. That doesn't mean people aren't going to get sick. I mean, if you take the view that if you only had enough bitachon, so what does that mean? Let's say, God forbid, somebody's mother is sick. And they get a message. If you have enough bitachon, she's going to get better. So mom dies. So what do you do with that? You either say, I didn't have enough bitachon. In other words, I'm responsible for my mother's death. Or you say the whole thing is a joke. Neither is a good response. The Chazon Ish would look at it in a different way. The Chazon Ish says, we don't understand why Hashem decided what he decided. His wisdom is beyond us. But this was the right thing that needed to take place at that particular moment in time. And because of that, I can be sad. You lose a parent, you're sad. But I'm not going to be despondent. I'm not going to say it's useless, it's purposeless, it's worthless. I'm going to understand that there's some ktaiva that can come out of this. So bitachon does mean a sense of serenity, a sense of peacefulness. As opposed, right, emunah is in your head. Bitachon is when it gets translated into your personality. But it's not the more simplistic idea that my bitachon will always give me what I want, but it's a deeper idea that whatever it is good on some level. It's the Ratzon Hashem, and therefore it's good. So the Vilna Gaon says bitachon is the sheirish of many midos tovos. Right? Practically, if one has bitachon, one is not going to get angry. Well, I'm angry because I didn't get, what I thought I deserve. what I got is what Hashem wanted me to get. Now, the other thing that the Gra says is a shirish of midos tovos is his tapkus. His tapkus, meaning his tapkus b'muat, that means you're satisfied with relatively little. I mean, you don't need a lot. That's kind of an antidote to taiva. If a person has bitachon and a person has his tapkus, that is the shirish of the midos tovos that will allow a person to go on. You know, this reminds me of a story. Obviously, the story is not in the Even Shleima itself, but there was a time in the Vilna Gaon's life when he was in his 30s. He was already pretty well known, even in his 30s, but he decided he wanted to go into Golus. He was born in Vilna, so I mean, he lived in Vilna all of his life, but for around a year or 2 years, he wanted to hit the road anonymously, based on the teaching of Chazal, that Golus is mechaper averis. So he wanted to travel around different cities without revealing his identity. He was like a beggar. It wasn't that uncommon. There were plenty of Jews who were wandering around. So he was a wandering Jew, would go this city, that city. He would sleep in the Beis Medrash. You know, he didn't have a house to sleep in, etc. And this was a way of being mashrish anova and kaparas avainas. This is the famous golus of the Vilna Gaon. And of course, there are kama stories that he couldn't always conceal his greatness. That sometimes he'd be sleeping in a Beis Medrash and people would be learning and they had all sorts of problems. So he would write a secret solution that they could find the next morning. You know, he didn't want to give them a teretz directly. And when they found it, they would investigate who wrote it, who was in the Beis Medrash last night. So there were a lot of times where even as brilliant as the Vilna Gaon was, he couldn't conceal himself totally. People found out about him. There's even a story that he invented a mathematical formulation. The family name of the Gra was Kramer, Elio Kramer. So there's something in trigonometry that's called the Kramer parallelogram. I don't even know what it is exactly. But that is connected to the Vilna Gaon making some type of discovery at a university or something, whatever it would be. But the Vilna Gaon told a story years later of one of the most powerful experiences he had in Golus, that he was sitting in a Beis Medrash and he was learning, and next to him was a blind man, just a blind man, who was learning Torah the whole day. That's learning Torah. He davened with kavanah that he was learning. And then at some point his wife came in, the wife of the blind man, and brought him a piece of bread. And the man was so grateful. Baruch Hashem, Hashem gives us parnasa like a melech. The priest ran and he washed and he ate and he benched. And the Vilna Gaon was so nispile about this person that he really admired him. He began a conversation with him. And the man then said, Chashav Agast, could you come to my house for Shabbos? So the Gra didn't want to come for Shabbos because the Gra figured that the guy was very poor, which he was. And there is a halacha that you're not supposed to be nana from a seuda that the person cannot really afford. If a person can't really afford it, you shouldn't come. So he didn't want to go. No, don't worry about me. He says, on Shabbos, I'm kiyad hamelech. He says, I'm the biggest gevir. Everything is there. So he goes to the person's house, and to his amazement, he discovers there are 25 guests that he has for Shabbos. And these are Talmidei Chachamim, poor Talmidei Chachamim, and they talk and learning, and everything is gewaldig. And what was the food? So he says, my wife goes to the bakery at the end of the day, and she gathers up the flour dust on the floor. She has permission to do it. And, she gathers up enough dust for a few hours. She can make a few challahs from the flour dust. And then she goes to the butcher, and she gets chicken necks, which are going to be thrown into the garbage or something. And she gets them, and she makes soup, and we have a little meat to eat. He says, Gavala. And the man is telling the Gra, Gavala, Kiyad HaMelech HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes care of us like we are royalty. And the Vilna Gaon said, all of his life, he was makana, that blind person. Because that blind person had so much joy in the mu'at, in the mamish, his Topicus b'mu'at. And the person had a geschmack and a joy and an appreciation and a gratitude. And the Vilna Gaon said, it was kedai for me to go into Galus to meet such a person, because that's the person that I'm machshiv above all people. And again, the Gra l'shitase. I'm not sure if the Gra said this before or after he met the person, but he said, Bitachon and nishama are the shirashim of the midos tovos that a person has. I remember the first time, not the first time, but when I was in Eretz Yisrael. I wasn't living here yet. So I was here. I used to come every other year for JLE in Ohr Somayach. So I worked for Ohr Somayach before I worked for Ohr Somayach. I remember on Shmuel Hanavi, just a picture that stays in my head, of 4 kids who were walking, and they were sharing a popsicle. Imagine one popsicle that 4 kids are sharing with each other. Again, the hygiene was not an issue there, pre-COVID, whatever it was, and they were laughing and having such a good time. And I think to myself, it's mamish Isaiah Washer Sameach B'chelka. In America, no kid's going to stand for. I don't have my own popsicle. What do you mean? I have to have my own room and my own television. What do you mean? I don't get my own popsicle. And yet the truth is, who's happier? Who's happier? The 4 kids who are sharing a popsicle, or the 4 brothers, each of whom has their own iPad or whatever it is. So it's really emes. It's not just a vort from the Gra, but it really is lemaisa in life that the bitachon and the histopicus can be a tremendous source of midos tovos and simcha in life as well. Bitachon, I'm sameach because whatever happens, I know is good. Histopicus, whatever I have, I'm happy with. I don't need more. I don't say I have to have more. Right, so in Perek Gimel, we're going to talk about bitachon and histopicus. Okay, Perek Daled, again, today I'm just going over the table of contents. Perek Daled is the discussion of the Milchemes HaYetzer, the various strategies, how the Yetzer Hara tries to be machshel me, and how do I fight the Yetzer Hara. Now, if you think about it, the basic theme here is there are 2 different ways that the Yetzer Hara tries to fight me. Sometimes the Yetzer Hara tries to trick me into thinking that something is good when it's not. Meaning that's a ruchniistic mistake. It makes me think that what the Aveira is really a mitzvah. Other times it says, yeah, I know it's an Aveira, but I don't care. I'm going to break it anyway. 2 different things. The Chavetz Chaim says this word. It's a famous word from the Chavetz Chaim. It says by Arif, V'hasar satan milfanenu umiacharenu. Every night we say, remove the satan from in front of me and in back of me. Now, what does that mean? Satan is the Yetzer Hara. Chazal say Satan, Yetzer Hara, Malach HaMavet, it's all the same thing. Bishlama, the Satan in front of me. I want to walk into the Beis HaMedrash and the Satan is blocking me and gives me all sorts of reasons not to learn. So I ask Hashem, please remove that Yetzer Hara that's blocking me from good mitzvahs. But what is the Satan in back of me? He's in back of me already. I'm past him. Right? What is the Satan in back of me that I'm praying to remove? So says the Chavetz Chaim, that could be the Satan that's pushing you into the Beis HaMedrash. How so? They tell the story that the Chavetz Chaim used to go into the Beis Medrash in Radin after midnight and would shut off the lights. Because he said, sometimes the Yetzer Hara tells you to learn, stay up till 3 in the morning, and it looks like it's a good thing, but he knows he's going to get you, because what's going to happen is you're going to get sick, and you'll wind up doing much less. So we ask Hashem, protect me from the Yetzer Hara that tries to make me sin, but protect me from the Yetzer Hara that tries to convince me that something is good, when in the long term it's not going to be good. In fact, they say Rebbe Yashiv, throughout his life, he did not have the minhag of staying up Shavuos night. He did not have that minhag because he made a cheshbon based on minutes, and he said, I will actually be learning less by staying up all night than if I just, his regular schedule anyway, he got up at 2 in the morning. So he said, my regular schedule is better. So sometimes we have a Yetzer Hara, we want to do something really dramatic and really, super and exceptional, but in the long run, that's going to impair us in terms of our normal avodah, right? So that's going to be a discussion about the Milchemes HaYetzer. Perek Hey is Yiras Hashem, Avas Hashem, the importance of that. Now here I just want to point out that remember that the Vilna Gaon lived at the very beginning of the Hasidic movement, right? Hasidus began in the basically the time of the Vilna Gaon. And as you know, the Vilna Gaon himself, who was normally not involved in Hachrazas, Charam, the Vilna Gaon normally was kind of isolated with his Talmidim, but the Vilna Gaon did take an active role in expressing the opposition to Hasidus. And there are a lot of different problems the Vilna Gaon had with them. Some of the problems, maybe this is a share for another time really, are esoteric and Kabbalistic, although they're very important, but they're not simple, such as what is the nature of symptom, right? The Arizal taught, again, just an introduction, that how did HaKadosh Baruch Hu create the world? I mean, in other words, if Hashem is everywhere, then how can I be here? How can I be here? How can the table be here? Isn't Hashem here? So the Arizal says, in order to enable the creation of a finite world, Hashem had to conceal himself. Hashem had to withdraw. Hashem had to fold himself up. It's like you take a towel and fold it up, and that creates what's called halal. Halal is vacuum. And in the vacuum, Hashem puts light, which turns into creation. That's called symptom, contraction. Not concealment, but that's a contraction. God had to contract to enable physical reality to exist. Hasidus taught that the Ari's idea of symptom cannot be taken literally, because that would imply that there's an area in the physical universe that does not contain God. If this is called symptom kipshuto. If you say symptom kipshuto, that means there's no God here. That's not possible. The Zohar says, Les asar panoi minei. There is no place that's empty of God. So because of this, Sfarim like the Balatan, like the Tanya, etc., they developed the idea, what's called symptom lav kipshuto, that symptom is a concealment of God. It's a hester of God, but it's not a withdrawal of God. Meaning, right? Hester rather than withdrawal. The Gra, on the other hand, took the position that that was kefira. That was kefira, because if you're telling me God is in everything, then that's really pantheism. You're telling me God is in the table, right? God is in the basic Kiser of Chaim Volosher says. You're saying everything is God. Everything is God. If everything is God, that's nichshal in Avodah Zarah. And therefore we have to believe that although Hashem is the Borei, and Hashem is the Manik, and Hashem is the Mashgiach, that's for sure. Of course everybody says that. But there has to be a difference. There has to be a removal between God and the Bria, because otherwise you're turning the Bria into God. Right, so this is an esoteric machlokas. This is machlokas symptom kipshutai, symptom lav kipshutai, and that was a major issue where the Gra held that that particular teaching may have been kefira, but many people didn't even understand what that debate was about. But that's a higher level debate. The lower levels, the Gra had the following problem. Chasidus emphasizes what you might call the panemius of Avodah. Meaning, the most important thing in a mitzvah is the avas Hashem and the yiras Hashem. And that's true, right? All of that is true. In fact, the Gra himself will have many, many teachings on avas Hashem and yiras Hashem. But you see, there's a certain problem, because as you emphasize panemius avodah, there is sometimes a sakana that you will neglect some of the chitzonius of the avodah. Let's take a simple example. Let's take Zman Kriya Shema as a good example. So we say Zman Kriya Shema is whatever it is, 8:22. Okay? Which means you are mechuyev the araisa to read Shema before 8:22. And if you don't read Shema by 8:22, you are mevatel a mitzvah l'sei min haTorah. Now, let's assume at 8:22 I'm dead tired. I'm not ready to get out of bed. But by 9:30 or 10 o'clock, I can do a gewaldige Shema with Yiras Hashem and Avas Hashem. So a person might say, could they not? Isn't it much more important to have kavana and have passion and have excitement and have Hisayrus and Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem than to make Kriya Shema by 8:22? So this was the problem. In fact, if you read the Nefesh HaChaim, you have to understand the Nefesh HaChaim is addressing this problem of early Hasidus, in which the subjectivity of inner religious experience was so dominant that it sometimes led to neglect of the pratim of halachas. This is an issue that even today very much exists. In fact, Rav Chaim Volozhiner gives an example. I mean, it's interesting. The example he gives is, let's say a Seder of Pesach, right? So let's assume you would decide that Pesach comes and you're so tired, you're dead tired. So the first night of Pesach, you figure this, I'll go to sleep early tonight. And tomorrow morning, there will be a Seder like you've never seen, since Sheshes Yemei Bereshis. But that would be a shtus. Bracha levatalas, you're not Yaitse Matzah, you're not Yaitse Mara. So I once told this story to a group that they were not yet religious, not in Ohr Somayach. And I was saying it as an example of how ridiculous it would be to make the Seder the wrong day because there's more, emotion involved. Ridiculous. Like you figure you're talking to people that everybody would laugh and say, oh yeah, what? So somebody says, yeah, that's what we did last year. He says, we couldn't get the family, it wasn't for Ruchnius reasons, we couldn't get the family together till the last day. So we decided to delay the Seder till the last day. Great Seder. It was the best Seder we ever had. So the truth is, what starts off as kind of almost a joke, is actually taken seriously. So what's interesting is there's kind of a push and a pull here, meaning Chasidus was emphasizing Ava v'Yira. The Litvasher were emphasizing Diktuke Halacha. You gotta do the Halacha right, because that's Hashem's commandment. But these are kind of stereotypes, meaning in reality, the Gedolei Chasidus also were Medayik in Halacha, and the Misnagdim, like the Gra, spoke about Avos Hashem and Yiras Hashem. So that's why Perek Hey is a very important Perek, because it teaches us the Gain's Shita on Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem. You see, otherwise you'd have a caricature. You would say, oh, Hasidim are into emotion. Litvaks just do the cold thing. They don't think about Avos Hashem and Yiras Hashem. So you need to know that Avos Hashem and Yiras Hashem is very, very important in this world as well. Okay, Perek Vav, Chinuch Habanim, right, very important. Most of you guys are not parents yet, but eventually you have to know, how do you raise a child? How do you educate a child? And surprisingly, you'd figure, we're going to, again, I'm not giving away some stuff, but again, just to give a one or two thoughts from each perek at the outset. If you'd imagine the Vilna Gaon as a mechanech, I think the stereotype would be, he'd be on the tough side. He'd be on the tough side, kind of, no bein hazmanim, no breaks, just keep on going the whole year, which of course is the way the guy lived his own life. His whole life he lived that way. But you'll see that surprisingly enough, he talks about the idea of being very, very gentle with children, not being overly demanding, giving them breaks, giving them rewards. He says you want to make the Torah sweet to them. You want to make it delightful to them. And when you put too much pressure on them, that could break them and that could take away their joy. So it's interesting that the Gra was, at least as a mechanech, at least for younger children, the Gra was advocating a much more gentle approach rather than being that forceful. Perek Vav is about Shkeda B'Torah. Of course, this is the biggie, about Limud HaTorah. Perek Ches also talks about what is Lishma, what is Shalom Lishma. And here, by the way, the Gra has a very, very strict shita. All of us know the famous Chazal. Li'olam Yasek Adam B'Torah Shalom Lishma Shemitayich Shalom Lishma Yavai Lishma. Famous Chazal. A person should learn Torah even if he's doing it not lishma. Because by learning not lishma, the kayach of the Torah will eventually bring you to lishma. So a person should never say, oh, I'm not learning lishma, so why should I bother learning? No, even shelo lishma is valuable. So the question becomes, Tosfos asks the kasha, how can Chazal say there is value to learning Torah shelo lishma? There is another Chazal that says a person who learns Torah shelo lishma, it is better that he was never born. So Tosfos asks the stira, you're telling me it's better that he's not born, then you're telling me mitoch shelo lishma ba lishma. So Tosfos says there are two types of shelo lishma. There is a shelo lishma that I'm not learning for Hashem, I'm learning for Oisher, I'm learning for Kavod. So that's not the highest madrega. But on that we say, mitoch shelo lishma ba lishma. So even if I'm learning for Kavod, okay, but mitoch shelo lishma ba lishma. So what is the shelo lishma that's so bad that it's better you were never born? That, Tosfos says, is when you learn lekanter. Now, lekanter, kuf nun tes reish, means you learn to humiliate or cut other people down. Meaning, if I learn for kavod, I want people to admire me, so that's shelo lishma. But if I learn because I want to show you up, I want to show people that you don't know something, that is such a negative thing that is better that the person is not born at all. He does not get any reward for Torah learning under those circumstances. So according to Tosfos, that actually means most of the shelo lishmas that we engage in are going to be acceptable. Meaning, lekanter is a pretty bad thing. Lekanter is not a common thing. Even if I'm learning because I want to show off, but if I'm not doing it to cut you down and be mavazi you, so I'm not lekanter. However, so according to Tosfos, most of us are okay. Meaning, even if we're not lishma, most of us fall into the permissible shelo lishma, shemitoch shelo lishma ba lishma. But the Gaon is very machmer on this. The Gaon actually learns that if you learn Torah for Oisher v'Kavod, that's just as bad as lekanter. Just as bad as lekanter. And the only thing that's permitted, shelo lishma, mitoch shelo lishma, ba lishma, is somebody who learns for no reason at all. It's only because minag avaisa biyadim. Meaning, I learn because I was raised to learn. And I don't have a particular reason why I learn. This is just what I do. So that already is mitoch shelo lishma, ba lishma. The question that we're going to have to think about is, if the Vilna Gaon is assimilating, like Oisher v'Kavod, into the bad shelo lishma, I mean, what are the implications? Is the implication that I shouldn't learn? And what is he saying? Let's assume that a person learns because he wants kavod. So the Vilna Gaon says, that's as bad as lekanter. It's better that he wasn't created. So what does that mean as a practical eitzah? So do I tell the person, oh, you're learning for kavod? Don't learn? That doesn't sound right. I don't think that sounds right at all. So it's a bit of a tzarech iyan. It seems to be almost a strange dichotomy. Your learning is worthless, but it would be worse for you if you wouldn't do that. Meaning to say, you're sinning by learning shelo lishma, but your sin of not learning would even be a bigger avera. So it's kind of, you'll get punished for doing what you're doing, but you would get more punished if you wouldn't even do that. I don't know, because it's borrowed that the Gemara is not telling me if I have an impermissible shelo lishma, I shouldn't learn. That I don't think would be correct. Let's just finish up the names of the chapters. Perek Zayin, again, this is a third, in fact, there are 4 chapters in Talmud Torah. He talks about Devarim B'Telem, etc., how to be matzel yourself from Bittul Torah. Now, Perek Ches is going to be very interesting. Darchei Halimud. Darchei Halimud is... this is something that anyone in yeshiva is very, very intimately interested in. What type of derech should I have in my learning? B'kiyas, iyun, fast, slow? Should I learn Tanakh or not learn Tanakh? What things should I study? So this is going to be a very, very practical thing. And I may skip around practical thing in terms of curriculum. What is the curriculum of a Ben Torah? That's probably the single, most common question that people have in yeshiva. And to hear the Vilna Gaon's advice as to how you should learn and what you should learn is obviously going to be very, very important. Perek Tes is about tefillah. So yes, there's more about Torah than tefillah. But the Vilna Gaon has many teachings about tefillah, mainly from Sefer Mishlei. And he does talk about the idea that it's kedai to be marech in tefillah. The only limitation he has on tefillah is it is best not to daven more than 3 hours a day. To daven more than 3 hours a day might fall under bittul Torah, but up to 3 hours a day, he says, is perfectly fine, and that's going to give you siyata d'shmaya to learn more in Torah. So I think most of us wouldn't have a problem with living within that time limit. Now, Perek Yud and Yud Aleph are very, very fascinating because in a way, it's a little bit of an exception. Until now, we've been talking about midos, Torah learning, midos ros, midos tayvais, chinuch habanim, which includes also in their midos. But Perek Yud and Yud Aleph is about schar v'einish. Perek Yud is about what happens to the nishama after you die. Where does your nishama go? Gehenim, Gan Eden, Olam Haba, and all of that different processes. And Perek Yud Aleph talks about the Erev Rav, Chavlei Mashiach, and Mashiach in this world. Right? So Yud is the world of the neshama after death, and Yud Aleph is the world of Geula in this world. And let me just point out, the Erev Rav, this is one of the interesting teachings of the Gaon here. The Gaon expands the concept. I mean, again, it's based on the Zohar, totally based on the Zohar, but the Gaon develops the concept of Erev Rav way beyond the comparatively narrow definition in the Torah itself. The Torah simply tells me when the Yidden left Mitzrayim, there were a lot of Egyptians that wanted to join them. They had seen the Makos, etc. And Moshe Rabbeinu accepted them. Machlekes, did they convert? Did they not convert? But Moshe accepted them. And indeed, Chazal say Moshe shouldn't have accepted them, and they created a lot of tsaros. Chazal say consistently that most of the Averos in the Midbar were were instigated by the Erev Rav. How many people were in the Erev Rav? An amazing number. Some midrashim say ki yaitse Mitzrayim, 600,000 people, and some say kiflayim ki yaitse Mitzrayim, double, 1,200,000 people. So Erev Rav was huge. The problem is you don't really hear about them afterwards. So one answer might be that all of the Erev Rav died in the Midbar. Along with the Dor HaMidbar, the Erev Rav died, right? So they didn't enter Eretz Yisrael. So we don't hear about them anymore. They were a one-time thing, and they're just gone. Which actually means, according to that, many, many more people died in the Midbar than just the 600,000. The whole Erev Rav died in the Midbar. But the Gra, again, based on the Zohar, has a whole idea that to this very day, there are aspects of the neshamas of the Erev Rav that are nisarev in Klal Yisrael. And they are the source of machlokes and sinas chinam, and people who are mavazeh talmidei chachamim. And the Gra says Erev Rav is alive and well spiritually within Klal Yisrael. In fact, there's even a vort. Why are Erev Rav mavazeh talmidei chachamim? Because the Zohar says every Talmid Chacham has a nitzotz of Moshe Rabbeinu's neshama. So when you're mavazeh Talmid Chacham, you're mavazeh Moshe Rabbeinu. Because every Talmid Chacham is a nitzotz of Moshe Rabbeinu. Memela, this is Moshe Rabbeinu's einish. Since he shouldn't have accepted the Erev Rav, the einish is the Erev Rav are consistently mavazeh Moshe Rabbeinu, who shouldn't have. That's good for Moshe Rabbeinu's einish, that he's nisbaza by the very people that he should not have accepted in the first place. But be it as it may, if you follow blogs, not that you should, but if you follow messianic blogs that are very popular in Eretz Yisrael, people like to talk about Chavlei Mashiach and Russia and the Ukraine, and they point out this and that and that. So you will come across the Gra's teachings on Erev Rav from the Eben Shleima, that they apply to all sorts of things. Unfortunately, the world we live in is anybody you don't like, you simply say it's from the Erev Rav. Say, and that's not proper, and that's not a way of speaking. But all of the Lashon Hara of calling people Erev Ravs is based on, indeed, the idea of the Gaon, that the negative kaiches of Erev Rav continue to infiltrate and poison Klal Yisrael to this very day. Okay, so that's an overview of the prakim, and then Mr. Shem will go through it. Again, I can't say automatically I'll do every single thing, but at least we'll try to do something from every parak. If we do finish, although usually it takes me longer to go through a Sefer than I anticipate, then maybe we'll consider Das Tavunas to see if it works. But they say Das Tavunas right now might be too big of a piece of meat to chew on. Okay, be well. Hatzlacha.